Welcome to our Galentine's webinar on the evolution of SEO and how to win over Google's heart. I'm Nicole MacLean, CRO here at Composely, joined by two of my favorite Galentines, Kaylee Peterson and Ashley Strosnider. We will do official intros here in a second. But yes, we're really excited to talk about this topic because I've been hearing it a ton from prospects and from clients. Maybe both because they are like our points of contact are seeing this in the market, but also their bosses are starting to see it and then asking us little marketers, what are you doing? How are you adapting to AEO and generative search? And it's like, okay, we've got you. Let's define it. Let's empower you with some vocabulary and then figure out next steps. So that's really our roadmap for today. A few housekeeping items before we do official intros and kickoff. Everyone in the audience is on auto mute, but please use the chat. Please use the Q&A function. I'll be keeping an eye on both of them throughout. We will have time for questions at the end. We also are recording today's webinar. Triple check. We are recording. So we will be sending out a copy of this tomorrow for you all. So don't feel like you have to take copious notes. You can come back and visit. And then I always just like to say this in a work from home world. If you can't tell, Kaylee and I are in our kitchens. Ashley has her incredible bookshelf behind her. But in case there's any technical snafus or weird things, just know that we'll troubleshoot and get back to you. And you might see some cats jump in, and we love when we get special guests like that. But let's dive in. So first, Ashley is our chief editor joining us from Jersey City. Ashley, welcome. What is your favorite Valentine's candy?
This is such a hard question. Because I was reading the chat and everyone's like, does this count? Does chocolate count? Like everything counts. But I think I gotta go with the conversation hearts. Like they're not good. They taste like weird chalk, but you get them once a year. And like if somebody handed me a box of them, I would read them and I would eat them, and there's no way around it. So I think it gets my vote.
I like it. I agree. You have to have at least like it's like the thing. It's like candy corn. You love or hate it, but you have to have it around the holiday.
Mhm.
And Kaylee, welcome to you as well, our director of SEO, joining us from Charleston, South Carolina. Outside of your mom's favorite chocolate chip cookies, what is your favorite Valentine's candy?
Mm. Well, my birthday is the 15th, so it's always been a combination celebration
Mm.
for me. So honestly, for me, it's birthday cake. It's my go-to Valentine's candy because it's usually all one big
One
celebration.
big thing,
But if I had to give a real answer, it would be chocolate. I mean,
chocolate.
it's the chocolate holiday. It's the time of the year.
This is probably way more information than the audience is looking to get. But it's so interesting because Ashley's birthday is Christmas Eve, and now I'm just putting it together that Kaylee's is the day after Valentine's. So there's really like a holiday pre-post holiday birthday theme here with you two.
You say we're very special ladies.
You are. I hope that nobody cuts your birthday celebration in half for the other holiday because that happens too often. This is
No.
this is your takeaway if you're on the webinar. If there's someone in your life you care about whose birthday falls on a holiday, make sure that they still feel celebrated and not gypped by the
Mhm.
other holiday. All right, let's dive into SEO now that we've galantined it up. So I'm just going to start by saying SEO is not dead. We love to throw that out there. We love to get a clickbait headline. SEO is dead. Like you have to do the new latest and greatest thing. SEO still 100% has a place in your marketing mix, in your marketing channel. It's just evolving as it always has, as email has evolved, as social has evolved, so too does SEO. And we hear a lot of kind of new alphabet soup that's coming out. There's been AEO, there's generative search. Kaylee, can you just kind of level set for us? Like, what is this AEO generative search thing? Can you just define it for us?
Yeah. So AEO at its core is answer engine optimization, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's optimizing for engines that give answers, which is kind of what SEO has done for a long time, but it's a new fancy version. And it used to be really focused on voice search. So when Alexa and Siri came to be, that's where AEO started to originate. Now you have the AI search engines, the ChatGPT, the Gemini, the Perplexity, and it's evolved to also include some of that AI searching, which is where you see the shift to generative answer optimization or generative engine optimization. But essentially, it's capturing all of those search functions outside of the Google, the Bing, the standard organic web searches that you're seeing. So it covers kind of the evolution of SEO, but um, it also evolves as we go. The terms do and what they mean.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously search has always been based on questions or queries that someone's going in. It almost feels, I don't know, this I've not actually talked to you about this, but it almost feels like a little retroactive to now be focused just so much on answers. Like it felt like we spent all this time evolving SEO to say it's not just an FAQ. Like I think back to the old days of Cha-Cha, SEO is so much more. You need EAT, you need authority, and it's all this other stuff. And now I almost feel like when I started reading about AEO, it's like, nope, we're just going back to 10 years ago. It's just the FAQs, blah, blah, blah. Like, curious your thoughts on that for both of you.
Yeah, I mean, for me on the SEO side, I've been doing SEO for a really long time, and it feels like we're closing the loop on SEO where it used to be about the forums, the Reddit. You could rank and you could drive traffic by just simply answering questions. And then it was a long road of in-depth and long-form content and building out a website and building a brand. And there's still a big chunk of that that exists and that drives it, but it does feel like Google's bought Reddit now. It's really pushing these quick answers, the zero-click searches. Like we are kind of going back around to just people want a quick answer and leave.
Can you
And
define that zero click experience just for someone who maybe hasn't heard that before?
yeah, so zero-click search is the idea of, and I'm sure you've all experienced a zero-click search that you search something and Google opens it up and you get your answer and you leave. So you never actually click into a website. You just simply get your answer and go. And so Google prefers that because obviously you see Google as your information source. Google's your one-stop shop. And websites don't love it, but it is the evolution of the AI overview where you get there, you get your answer, and you just go.
Ashley, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are kind of similar to both of y'all's. It does not sound that revolutionary to me. And not to be a curmudgeon about it, but from the editorial content side, I have always thought if you're writing good content, you are trying to answer people's question. Somebody's got something they're trying to find out, you need the answer. So whether you call it search engine optimization, people search for an answer. So now we're just calling it the other thing. There are a few technical differences, obviously, but I think at the end of the day, particularly if you are thinking about end users, readers, customers, getting them the information that they want, the philosophy of it doesn't feel that it's changed a lot to me.
Well, and I think, again, to kind of cut through the noise out there, Kaylee, when you first were, enabling us on this and saying, "Hey guys, I'm seeing this in the market. It's happening." It's like I can't knock a marketer for hopping on a trend to help get people to their site and do the lead gen thing. Like that's the game. But it almost feels like we're just calling it something new so that people can go out there and sell a bunch of stuff. But I don't know that that's needed in this case. And like that's kind of where we're going to transition to now is okay, so answers are the focus. They kind of always have been. What are the best practices right now? And do we really need to be changing and shifting our strategy? Kaylee, I'll let you kick us off.
I mean, short answer, no. I think at its core, it's still good content that answers people's questions and accurately gives them what they want when they search. It's matching search intent. It's being the best resource on the information. It's being the best representative of the information, of having a unique perspective and unique insights. That I don't think is going away and has been kind of the core of good content SEO for a long time. Um, there are, I think, some tweaks that we could make, like the way we structure content, understanding we're being really clear. And if there's a question, here's a clear answer. And now we're expanding. We're using FAQs and structured data. We're doing some technical impacts to make sure that not just Google, but all crawlers understand very clearly what the content is on site and how to understand it. But I think at its core, the content still remains really rooted in great content practices.
Actually, tell us more about those great content practices.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything Kaylee has said. I think this is such a crucial question right now, and a lot of it comes down to, what are your SEO goals or your AEO goals or your whatever we're going to call these kinds of goals. Like, what are you trying to do with the content, with the users on your website? Because quality content at the end of the day, should answer the question, should be accurate, should be reliable, it should be a good representation of your brand. What that means to different brands changes a lot. You have some brands out there that are really interested in kind of persona, in voice, in tone. This is how we sound. This is how we want people to perceive us. And so I think that's a piece to me that's really interesting is how we'll see that transition because there was a while there a lot of people were doing this kind of long form, more original, voicier, put more perspective in it. And there's certainly still a place for thought leadership and all of this. But as we start thinking about like, oh, if what I really want to do is like get pulled into that generative search, is it as important to have this kind of voicey thing, or is that actually going to get in the way of the machine readers being able to parse and populate from you, give you that little link up there? So much of it, I think, depends on what you're trying to do. I think there's room in the world for both. I think we probably need both. I think people are going to want both to some degree, but just as we're building out content plans and maybe I want to target this with this piece, but maybe I'm going to take a different approach for this piece because it we know as anyone in marketing knows it is hard to be all things for all people, and I think that's becoming increasingly more true about any given piece of content. Like you're not going to get in the AI overview and also have this really brilliant piece that everyone's going to want to quote on LinkedIn, maybe, but not all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get to a crux that I hear often, and it's a hard thing for marketers, especially because resources are cut, budgets are not wildly available. And I mean, to cut to it, I think it's writing for the algorithm or writing for people. And I think that's been the tension of SEO for years now is, oh, don't write for the algorithm. We have to write for people. And that is writing to the algorithm. And we're going to talk about some of the actual technical things that you kind of previewed it, Kaylee, but there are things that you can do just to help make sure your site is well read. It is easy for the bots to get in and find those answers. But then you have the people who are ideally hoping, like hopefully coming here too. I think that is where distribution, which maybe is a whole separate webinar we should talk about, is creating content that is answer optimized or is SEO optimized. And then can you repurpose it with a webinar, with video clips, with something on social that brings in more of that voice and brings in more of that thought leadership, or you have really good interlinking, as Kaylee and I like to talk about a lot, that you have that maybe more AEO focused blog post, but then you're linking out to something to another blog post that is voicier, maybe more conversion focused and helps build that relationship with your brand. So it's an interesting place, I think, to be in right now as a marketer is like which comes first, and then what's your distribution and repurposing plan.
Yeah. And I would just add that I really don't think that they're always at odds. Like as a person who has studied writing and editing, like I'm not here for a bad piece of content. Oh, that was just for the algorithm. Don't worry about it. But I think about when we're structuring, formatting, outlining the content. I want the writing to still be good, but a lot of the things that sometimes we're like, oh, it's pretty bullet point heavy. Like I had imagined something more narrative. And then it's just kind of reframing, like, are they strong sentences? Are they clear, concise, factual? Is this an okay way for people and machines to read? And like I don't think the answer has to be one or the other, but I think, depending on the goal, sometimes we have to frame kind of what our expectation for how that content would look because we want to use some of these structural elements that I know Kaylee's going to talk about later.
Well, actually, that's a great tee up. Let's dive into those structural things. So, for someone who's not an SEO expert who gets very intimidated in the back end of their CMS, Kaylee, can you break down the technical elements that we should be considering and give ourselves kind of that extra boost?
Yeah. So I think the number one thing that you'll want to look at is your website crawlable? So the best way to do that is to look at your robots.txt file, and it is usually just your domain slash robots.txt. You'll look at it, that will have instructions on that page for what crawlers are actually allowed to do when they get to your site. Usually, the standard language is just allow everything. Here's the sitemap link, good to go. But some tools like a Yoast or a Rank Math, they'll put some custom instructions in there. I've seen some sites will add custom instructions that will disallow crawling from some of the AI bots, from a ChatGPT, from a Perplexity. I think when AI first rolled out, there was instruction out there to block them from accessing your site, to essentially protect your content from being pulled into those and remain, you don't want to be part of the AI generative experience. I think that's a choice brands have to make. But know that if those instructions are in there, you won't be involved in those AI searches. You won't be involved in this kind of evolution of SEO. So making sure your robots text is really open and clean and allows the robots to actually crawl your site. Um, I think there are some on-page pieces to schema or structured data. Essentially, at its core, it is just a line of code that you'll put into your content. You can put it as like a custom HTML snippet. And there are versions of um, schema that kind of outline the types of content you're seeing. So one of the really popular ones is FAQ schema, and it just outlines specifically there's an FAQ on this page, and this is the question, and this is the answer. It's an HTML code, it goes into the content, but we're finding that a lot of the crawlers on the AI side, especially, are kind of lazy. They're just scanning and they're looking for a quick question and answer here. And if they can see that in the data and in the HTML coding, they're going to get that and grab that way faster than if they have to kind of sort through the content and look for it themselves. So schema, structured data, there's a lot of resources out there. Google has a verification tool where you can put in the URL and it will tell you if it's seeing structured data on site, and if it is, if it's correct and it's actually been done correctly. So there's tools out there to verify and also to see if any exists at all to begin with. And
What was that tool, Kaylee?
it is Google's rich snippet feature validator, I believe is the full name. I
Wow,
will,
so many buzzwords in
I will put the
so
right
such
name
small
into
time.
the chat for everyone. But it's a rich snippet validator. That's the other piece you'll see. So it could be called schema, could be called structured data, it could be called rich snippets. Um, you'll see versions of it. Yes,
Ooh,
Adam.
thanks, Adam.
That was exactly it. Um, so those are kind of two of the big ones we're seeing. We're seeing some other developing tactics that I honestly haven't seen enough proof to say if it's worth the investment or not. But there are things like developing an LLMS.txt file. It's essentially a language model specific version of robots.txt on your site that really guides to exactly how one of these AI LLMS files should crawl your site. That's pretty new. It's really, I think, in the testing experimentation phase. So I wouldn't say go run and do that right now, but there's some developing tactics people are looking at of ways to better technically structure your site for these evolutions too.
That is very helpful. Thank you for walking through that. Um, what if someone is we have like an Adam who thank you so much for sending that, who's like, I use this every day. What about someone who's like, okay, you said HTML and that's completely over my head. Like, are there things that kind of the layman can get into the back end and kind of do, or is it more of like you may just want to find someone who's really good at this, composely, a contractor, someone that can come in and kind of clean up that technical side?
I think there are content structuring pieces you can do that are probably easier. So things like if you're going to use an FAQ section, make sure that the title of the FAQ section is an H2, so frequently asked questions
Mm.
about. get more about this. And then the actual titles of those questions are H3 tags with text underneath. That's a super easy fix that really clearly structures the content into question and answer format. I think, we've seen the bulleted lists, the more broken out numbered lists are great. They're an easy scannable way to say, here are the quick tips, quick answers, quick guides. To Ashley's point, that often can register as AI content, even if it's human written bullets. So we always like to caution, be aware that sometimes that can come off as AI written, even if we know our best humans wrote it. But that structuring is really important too on the content side and making sure things are really clearly broken out. You're using headers in the right way. So you have one H1 that is the title of the page. The H2s really create clear sections. And then from there, you're using an H3 to break out that H2 even more. So think of it like chapter, subsections, and those are in a really clear, strong order. So there are, I think, are some simpler ways on the front end to add structure that will help. And then the more technical pieces, there are definitely resources out there. Honestly, everything is Googleable. It's all out there. But I would say those pieces, trying to apply structured data, knowing how to apply structured data, making sure it's applied right, those are pieces you might want to loop in an SEO expert for at least guidance or someone to double check that it's been done correctly. So you don't have anything on your site that would dissuade Google from ranking you the way you'd like them to.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And you t mention and kind of tee up Ashley. I'm curious to get your thoughts on. You have AI overviews, you still have a featured snippet, you have AI generated content. How do you think about what is a good SEO structured article? How do you prevent duplicativeness? Should we be putting FAQs actually at the top of our page instead of the bottom of the page? Like, where are you kind of seeing like what a good SEO article, AEO article means today?
Yeah, this is such a big question because everyone's trying to wrap their head around it, right? Because SEO is changing. What is AEO?
Mhm.
That's why we're here. But I still come back to, at the end of the day, something that's readable is what you want, readable by people and readable by the machines that need to crawl it. I think structurally speaking, yeah, start with an intro. You got to use your keywords a little bit, but like as people have evolved, as search tools have evolved, the ways that we're writing for the robots have changed too. You think back to 10 years ago and everything was keyword stuffed to the gills because that was how people thought that the robots could figure out, and we don't have to do that anymore. So I think, just the same things Kaylee's saying, like a clear, readable structure, get your headers, use your bullet points. I think that the places that get trickier, I think, are for brands that really want to be doing something super voicey or like I don't like bullet points because if I wrote this on ChatGPT, it would use bullet points, so don't. And it's like, well, okay, that can be a choice that you make, but you kind of have to balance both. So I'm curious, kind of, like I said before, you can't do everything at once, but as we kind of figure out which pieces of the content puzzle are trying to solve what search intent, what ranking position, whatever, I think some of it comes back to just like easing up to realizing that a lot of things are changing. There's a lot of paranoia too. Like, did somebody just draft this with AI? And it's like, if you paid a person to write it, you hope not. I totally get that. But I think, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, why does the AI like to use bullet points? Why are the LLMs using bullet points? It's because they learned that from the ways we've been doing content for a while. So I think there are these pieces where you just have to take a deep breath and say, I'm not going to worry so much about the provenance, how this was created, what like wizard tricks were done, but like, just is it readable? Can I figure it out? Is it going to rank? Like, is this sloppy or is it easy to get through? And I just think so much of it comes back to being well organized and wanting it to be well written and a good representation of your brand without being too precious about any one aspect of something, especially kind of during this change up phase. Because I don't know, I would wager a guess that we're going to end up re-optimizing a lot of stuff in the next couple years anyway.
Yeah. What about the duplicativeness of,
Oh,
oh, no, you're fine. I'm just, you know, ideally the blog is answering questions, the
mhm.
article, whatever, like you are authentically weaving in. Perhaps these questions are actually your H2s. I mean, I guess I look at Kaylee to say, is that your H2s should be questions, but then you also have recap FAQs again, where you really can get that structured data in there. And how do you make it not feel, or is it just a little bit repetitive?
Yeah, I think there's probably everyone feels the push and pull between the SEO recommendations and the editorial team recommendations of a beautifully written, well-read article in the SEO team of like, here's the best bullets and points to pull out and repeat yourself if you need to. So I think we've found a really good structure on our end between us and our editorial process too, is we know that there is a need for summaries at the start and end of articles. We've seen those be really successful. A key takeaway section that starts the article of kind of a, hey, here's the big four main ideas, both for crawling and also I think sometimes humans just want to be able to scan and understand, is this going to give me what I need? Cool. If not, I'm out and I'm on to the next thing. So looking at like a key takeaway section to start, that's really high level bullets. Obviously, you have your entire article that's well written, well structured. It covers the big ideas. It goes in depth where it needs to. And I think, yeah, there's a place where you could include these questions as your headers. You're using sections to really cohesively answer the big questions, the big ideas. Um, and then using an FAQ section to kind of summarize all of that and treating the FAQs as brief answers. So, whereas throughout the article, you might really expand on an answer to an idea, it might be like, yes, and also all these other things. And the FAQ answer is a really 50 to 100 words, maybe, of yes, this is the answer, and different than what you've heard before. I mean, we're not just copying. This is the answer you got below. Here's the answer again, but short. So putting a real editing writer on that piece of it, but using them as kind of summaries and end caps to make it scannable, to make it easily understood, and to win some of those SEO pieces too around the structured data. I think that that takes a great SEO brief that's really thoughtful around how to do that and how to include everything that you need to be competitive and not be repetitive. A great writer who understands how to kind of rephrase themselves a couple times, and a really good editor who's able to pull all those pieces together and clearly string those ideas together and be that like eagle eyes on everything. So I do think it takes a couple different pieces to string all those ideas together, but there's totally a way to do that. And we know that it's working to kind of tie the best of the SEO worlds and our best hopes for SEO and our best editorial features too.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially the focus on summary. The way you were phrasing that, I think is really useful. I think about if I'm editing a long blog, there's a couple different people who are going to land on this page. Somebody is going to want to read it in depth, and they will get all this information by the time they get to the FAQs. They may not read them as thoroughly because they already got that. There are other people who are going to control F or are going to just like scroll right down to the bottom and look for that kind of TLDR short summary. So I think that's an interesting piece too when we're editing and evaluating content is trying to figure out in a dream world everyone would read all of our blogs top to bottom, but we know we don't. I don't. And so I think part of it's that realistic take too. Where are people hopping in? Like should a FAQ ever include new information that wasn't in the body? No, because if you've read this whole article and then suddenly you're learning something like randomly new that wasn't discussed, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say never, never say never, but for the most part, they should be summative. This is kind of putting a fine point on what you just learned, like study notes at the end of textbooks. You get that little recap at the end. That's kind of how I think of it.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And I appreciate Kaylee you walking through the team aspect because it is, you do need kind of those different perspectives. And sometimes I'm sure there are people on this call today that they're like, I'm the SEO writing the brief and I'm the writer and I'm the editor, or I wear two of those three hats. And it's a lot to kind of keep in mind and balance. And so I think it's a good reminder to call out that those are three distinct skill sets. And even though marketers are powerhouses that wear many hats often, I think it's sometimes easy to forget that those are different lenses, and sometimes even checking yourself to be like, okay, now if I was just our SEO, how would I be looking at that? If I was really just serving as our creative director or a creative editor, what would I do? So I appreciate kind of looking at that team perspective. Another on, we've talked a lot about the answers. And again, I do feel like, I don't know, I'm feeling some deja vu of, 5, 10 years ago when it was all FAQs were the rage, and it's kind of coming back because I think people, it kind of fell off because we were looking for that narrative. But let's talk about authority when it comes to, are you the person that Google wants to answer the questions? Um, and there's a lot to that, but specifically, I think of things like bylines and whether or not it really impacts EAT or can really impact whether or not your article, if you have all this great structured data and this great summary that we just talked about, like it doesn't mean that you're going to be the site that Google thinks is the right person to answer these questions. So bylines, backlinking authority and backlinking profile, and some of maybe those off-page things, even of referral traffic and where you're showing up other places. How much do you think that is still playing into SEO for today? That's for both of you. So whoever wants to go first.
Um, I mean, I think it has an impact, and I think we're evolving towards it having more of an impact. Some of my favorite thought leaders right now are talking a lot about branded SEO and how the totality of your brand has an impact on your SEO and the way your website's performed and how much trust Google has in you, which I think domain authority is a score that every tool calculates differently, that has no official calculation or formula to it. But I think it boils down to, can you be trusted to talk about this topic and get it right? And I think a lot of that happens in branding. A lot of that happens in bylines and author bios, but it's, bylines of authors who can be trusted to write about that topic. They've written about it for 10 years. They've been published in major publications talking about these topics before. Yes, they're going to have great expert insight. So I think it's more than just putting bylines on or building backlinks, but it's being really thoughtful about how doing those things represents your brand and contributes to, should you be the expert? Should you be the insight here? Can you be the trusted voice for this topic, for this industry? So, yes, there are great tactics for that, but I think the tactics need a level of strategy to them that to me boil down to, is this what your brand represents? And are you the true, trusted, authoritative voice for this topic and for this content?
Yeah, there's a lot in there that I totally agree with that I think is really interesting. Like, this is such a gray area when it comes to bylines, when it comes to, EAT or even domain authority. Like, there's not a what, like, I can't grade your website and give you an EAT score. Google supposedly does it, but we don't know exactly how. So it's hard to put your finger on, like, what is the thing that's going to make the difference. So I think to Kaylee's broader point about just authority, are you a trusted authority in this space? Is your brand a trusted authority? There's a lot of ways to do that. If your website's a mess and you don't have any backlinks and it's a brand new site, you can have bylines from like the top person. But just because like some random expert wrote this blog, that might not get you there. And kind of vice versa. If you have a really solid site, you got a lot of things working well, like putting someone's byline on the article might help, but it depends a little bit on the space. If we're talking about your money or life spaces, hey, I think too a lot about readers. Like if I'm a reader, I'm Googling some random health thing, I'm on Healthline or WebMD, like I want I want that med reviewed by thing. I'm never gonna click and see like, did this doctor go to Harvard? Do I think they're legit? But I'm just like, okay, somebody who knows more than me looked at this. And I think that can do a lot of trust building with your audience, which is not worth nothing. The degree to which that actually informs Google rankings is like warm, fuzzy feelings. That's a little harder to pull out. So I think you got to make those decisions, when is this spend, worth it? Is the time worth it for what I'm trying to get done? If what you're trying to get done is, you know, appearing in those AI search overviews, they don't care if you got a byline. They care if it's concise, accurate, whatever. Sometimes you get concise, accurate, whatever, because you had an expert write it. But sometimes that expert maybe doesn't have a byline. Maybe it's this writer who's been in the manufacturing space for 20 years, since before we were online. She knows everything. But a lot of these blogs don't put her name on it. But so there's a lot of different ways, I think, to come at expertise, authority, how you're making sure that the information is accurate, but then also, on the flip side, how you're sending those signals to Google outside of just, is the content good? Which to me, that's the real question always. And then the rest is kind of icing.
Yeah. This ties into what we were talking about, and it's a great question we got from one of you in the audience. And it was the last point I wanted to talk about, which is the fact that Kaylee defined zero search click. And with it kind of started happening with featured snippets. It's really happening with AI overviews where you want to come in, get your answers, and then hop out. The impact of that is you want to be there, but it's going to impact your metrics. And I do want to make sure we talk about this because, especially if you're trying to report on things upwards, it doesn't mean there's a lot of nuance. And I'll read this profile here in a second, but you're probably going to lose web traffic because if you are showing up, people aren't clicking. It's zero click. They're not going to hit your website, but that doesn't mean you're not doing your job, which means as marketers, we have even more trust we have to have with leadership to say, like, I am doing my job. We are showing up where we need to be, even though that means that your traffic might go down. So this person added, I'm going to share kind of what they wrote. We added a bunch of FAQ pages to become a go-to source in our field and make it easier for people to find the answers they need. But it seems to have backfired. Our web traffic has taken a hit, dropping to about half of what we usually get. We kept things simple with a question and answer format, but something clearly isn't working the way we hoped. What might we have missed? Some of it might be you are showing up in these things now, but that means they're not going to your website. Maybe that's not half, maybe that's not 50%, but that could be some of it. Kaylee, what immediately comes to your mind when you hear that?
Yeah, I think the FAQ pages have been popular for a long time. Even I started doing SEO for specifically dentists. And at that point, it was even a business recommendation to just have an FAQ page that covered the whole experience of going to the dentist and what can I expect and what is the insurance and the pricing. But I think what we've seen and what the evolution is now is that a lot of those FAQs belong directly with the content that they're FAQ'd about. So rather than having your own FAQ page, working those FAQs into the related content. So if I'm working on a dentist site and I have a page about root canals, my root canal FAQs live directly on that page because they're more supporting for a subject topic than the site as a whole. That I have seen be more successful and work as an SEO supplement than the FAQ pages themselves being successful. I do think sometimes the risk of those FAQ pages is the value of them, where from a user experience, they have a ton of value for sure. Everything's in one place. And to your point, it's really easy for people to go get all of their questions answered in one spot. But from an SEO, from a searcher's perspective, they may not get their specific question answered because they have to sort through everything and it doesn't in-depthly answer their specific question the way a blog with an FAQ attached might. And I think the other piece of that too to look at is that specific page is going to be competing for a lot of different terms and a lot of different searches, and it's not going to be clear what that page's goal is. And I think that's some of the risk too, is that each of those FAQs could maybe be their own blog and could maybe be their own focus and target their own 20 searches. I mean, we know now you target one primary keyword, you could land in 50 more searches associated with that one target. So I think from a UX brand perspective, that FAQ page makes sense. I think from an SEO perspective, you're probably missing out on a lot of opportunities to expand on those questions that your audience has, and to capitalize on, if you know everyone's asking those questions, there's probably a lot more information that you can provide for each of those questions too, and drive traffic on a more independent basis than try to capture it all with one page.
I think that's a great point. I would also maybe think about, obviously, that's just a small paragraph snippet, but what is the interlinking on those FAQs? Did you just create a bunch of FAQ libraries, but are those sitting in kind of a silo? Or, were you able to go to maybe some of those blog posts that maybe touch on it and link to, I guess, Kaylee, I don't know which way it would link. I think blog posts where you link.
F Both ways. You
Both
probably want
ways.
both
Okay,
ways. Yeah.
great. So maybe the interlinking too, just to and thinking about the oh, I'm gonna say this wrong, but the page depth of I think just through like where does that FAQ library live, and is it really easy to get to it, or if those FAQs are kind of not buried, but if they're pretty hierarchical, say that word 5 times fast, you could be getting now 4, 5, 6 pages clicks to get there. So, those are just some things, again, that maybe gets a little more technical that just thinking through like what's the interlinking and how easy is it to get to it could also maybe help lift those. But Ashley, I can see you have some
I
some
think
thoughts too.
the only other question that I would have, and like not knowing this website, just any website, I'm thinking about what are the FAQs? Because I was working with a client a while back who realized they had cast too wide a net. They had a product that was targeting, parents, to buy their thing for some kids, and they were like, cool, there's a lot of just general searches that parents are running. So maybe we could write something about like how to teach your kids to share and how to and it was good, valuable content that I think people liked. But then suddenly they had all of these pages that weren't seeing a lot of traffic because this brand's website wasn't like, why would you be going to this bank to learn to teach your kid about sharing? Like, I think that their people liked it, but it wasn't their best niche to really focus down in. And I think they pulled back from some of that, repurposed it, moved things around. And so that would be my other question too. Like it can be really tempting to cast a very wide net and it can be really, like Kaylee said, really helpful for the users, but does it actually help your site or do things start to dilute your own authority by going too wide? Would be my other question.
Absolutely. Kaylee, do you?
Yeah, I was thinking that's a great point, Ashley, too, because I think, especially if you're watching SEO news and update, we've seen some big site crashes in the last 6 months. Like a Forbes marketplace used to dominate search and they got penalized pretty hard. Even the HubSpot SEO blog has been very popular recently for having a large drop off. But when you dig into what those drop offs were, they were casting huge nets. They were, especially Forbes. Forbes was, I mean, essentially using the Forbes name to write about anything and everything and drive affiliate traffic and make a lot of money, I'm sure. But none of it was relevant to the Forbes brand, to the site's focus, to what they were actually authoritative and speaking about. Even in the HubSpot situation, when you look at the blogs that dropped off, a lot of them had nothing to do with the HubSpot product or expertise or focus. They were big traffic plays, they were big SEO plays, but they didn't really relate back to what HubSpot was about and what they were talking about. And I think we do a great job of that here of focus on like what's actually relevant for your audience. Like we could go drive you, sure, 100,000 sessions a month of traffic, but is any of that going to convert? Does any of that matter to you? Would it be better to get 1,000 sessions a month and those actually become leads who matter because we're reaching the right people versus just SEO for the sake of SEO? And I think that's what has been happening, especially with the AI content. And people saw very easy to generate 1,000 articles a month of anything and everything for the sake of SEO. And I think we're seeing that quickly come back down to what should you actually be talking about and what's actually relevant to you and what can you actually be an expert in talking about?
And I think that's an important thing when you're looking at historical data nowadays. If you compare year over year where AI overviews weren't as prevalent, you might see a dip in your traffic. But I would really be looking at further funnel, like what is your conversion rate? In theory, if you lost traffic just because of the AI overviews, your click-through rate should actually go up because you're having less people, but they're more qualified. And actually, the people who are ready and looking to convert versus the person who just wanted the quick answer, the control find, as Ashley said, and then are hopping off to, go somewhere else. Um, time on page and engagement in theory should go up because you're not just getting that bounce of someone who got the answer. So I think it is looking at the full funnel and helping leadership or folks, peers who aren't spending your day to day in this and just recognize that the data needs more nuance than just okay, let me compare, 90 rolling 90-day average, rolling 6 month average, rolling year average. The data isn't going to necessarily be an apples to apples comparison. All right. Kaylee and Ashley, we got through a lot. Thank you so much. I love the great balance of some really tactical things. We got some asks about the robots TXT, and Adam, thank you for sharing that link, as well as just some like bigger things to think about when it comes to your strategy. I dropped Ashley and Kaylee's LinkedIn's in the chat, but we'll also include it in the follow-up email. Please follow both of them. They're both incredible. And if there's anything we can do to help or you have follow-up questions, again, reach out to us and happy to, kind of guide the best we can. But happy Galentine's Day to everyone. And Kaylin, Ashley, thank you so much for joining.